Hi all, and welcome to another video from 3 Odd Socks. I was asked to do a book creation video, so this is one that I had prepared earlier. I just had to put the pages in, but I will do a new one now. As you can see, these books are using the Bomo art poster sheets that I absolutely love. I managed to track some down in a local store, well, local to Australia, and bought a few poster sheets, and that's what I've been using to create my books. So this is another one that's ready for the pages to go in, but as said, I will create a whole new one for this video. So I use the Heidi Swapp storyline chapters notebooks for the inserts. I pull the books apart and you'll see that. So this is one that was done for June. You can see the pages in there, even completely finished. It sits nice and flat. So that's what the whole idea of making these books was for, so that I could have a whole month in one book with a flat edging, so I don't get the gator mouth effect. So they're ones that I've done. These are a couple of the sheets, poster sheets that I haven't used yet, so you can see they're absolutely huge. So I think I bought 6 to start with. And a maritime one. So they're the 3 that I haven't used, so I'll use one of those for today's book. So I decided today to use the deer or the forest theme for this book, and you can see it's huge and it's a big design, but big enough that it will sit well on the outside of a book. So for this one, I'm using a front and back cover from a book that I have repurposed. So I've taken the covers and cut them down to size, so you can see how it fits with the Heidi Swapp storyline chapters notebook. It's just a little bit on top and bottom, which is good for me. And then as you can see, the sheet is so big, I will get 2 whole books out of each sheet of poster. So these covers are from a series of books that were old and destined for the bin, and I am going to repurpose the covers. I've got a few in the series that I've taken the covers off and ready to use for these projects. So I've just cut it down to the size that I need for my project. You can see the top's cut off, and there's a little bit off the side as well to make it the right size for me. The idea of creating my own books was so that I could make the spine wide enough that I could fit all of my pages in for the month without having the gator mouth effect at the end. So for that, I had to therefore make my own spine. The reason I couldn't use the ones that came with the book, they were just too narrow. So I made my own spine wider so that it would fit flat at the end. I used a couple of the old books that I had, the Heidi Swapp ones that were full, and I took the width of the end product as a guide to how wide to make my spine, which I will include the dimensions in the description below. But I think it was about 4, off the top of my head, 4.5 centimetres wide I made the spine. So I just had to cut my own out of a piece of cardstock. I don't like cutting thick cardstock. I'm not very good with a knife, and you'll see that in the video when I start cutting. So in the past I have taken two thinner pieces of cardstock and stuck them together and done it that way instead of trying to use one thicker piece, but I managed to do one thick one for this project. So cut the card to the right width and the right height, and then it's a matter of putting it all together. And I do use a book creation tool to help, and I will put a link below for that as well. But you don't need to. You could just use a thin piece of cardstock or even a chopstick, really. It's just a matter of having a bit of a gap between your front cover and your spine and making sure that the gaps are all the same size. So you could find anything at home to initiate or to imitate that size. But I just put the tape on it just to hold it in the right spot so that they don't move around. I'm not a big fan of glue. I don't like working with glue as a rule. I much prefer tape. But I needed a piece of fabric on the spine to help strengthen the spine and keep it together. I've tried without fabric and it hasn't held very well. It sort of tears a little bit after a little bit of use. So I've decided to put a bit of fabric on the spine just to help reinforce it, and tape and fabric are not a good combination, so I have to use glue for taping the spine, for putting the fabric on the spine. But at least it's a bit more flexible when you're trying to put it on in the right spot and getting it. It's a bit forgiving. That's really the word. You can move it around a little bit as you need to. So just get it really nice and flat, because you don't want big humps sticking out in the finished product of your spine either. So I just used a bit of glue to hold that down, and then also having a card that is already pre-coated, because it was an old book repurposed. I was able to just grab a wet wipe and wipe off the excess glue on that side. And then we just do the same on the other side. Take the tape off, you don't need that anymore. And I just put fabric on the inside as well, again just to reinforce that spine so that it doesn't break apart as easily. Granted, once they've made, all they're going to do is be sitting on my shelf, but they do get a bit of a workout while I am working in them to do the month, so it just keeps them a little bit more secure in that regard. So just make sure you evenly spread your glue out. I have tried before just doing just putting spots of glue on them, and it just doesn't work. You really need to spread that glue out and have it all over the piece that you are trying to glue down. Alright, and there's the basic shape of our cover done. It's not hard, it's just time consuming, but I will admit that I have done several of these now and have messed up on many of occasion. I'm nowhere near being an expert at creating books. I have done many over the years, and all in different types and styles, because I just keep messing it up. But this one I think I'm pretty comfortable with now. Got to the point where I'm pretty happy with how they go. but I'm by no means an expert at creating books. So now we just have to go back to our original poster sheet so that we can work out the size we need to cover it. So allowing probably an inch and a half on each side so that you've got enough space to tuck it over. I've tried with scissors and I just make a big mess. Can never get it straight. So even though I'm pretty terrible with a knife, I've gone back to it for this particular cutting just to try and keep it a little bit neater. But you could just certainly use scissors to cut this out. So as I said, I really don't like glue, and I've had terrible issues with gluing paper onto book spines with glue, so I've reverted back to my love of tape, and I just have really fat double-sided tape, which I call the toilet roll, and I use that. Again, I've stuffed this up many a time, messed it up, trying to get this on, but I think I've sort of worked out how to do it now. But this is definitely not forgiving. So it is quite tricky to reposition it if you do get it wrong. So just because that tape sticking out the side, it does stick to things whenever you try and maneuver it. So I just cut it off before I start playing with the other side, just to make it again neat, and that excess is not trying to stick to everything that's around. Alright, so then we just tape the other side. Got no extra that's sticking to anything at the moment. So we've still got that side taped up, so it's not getting messy. But by all means, you could do this with glue. But again, make sure you put glue over the whole piece, because I have found out wherever it doesn't glue, it sticks up and goes all bubbly, and your book looks terrible in the end. So make sure you cover every tiny bit of that paper with the glue if you're going to do glue. And you could do that one side at a time. You don't need to cover the whole thing with glue at once. But as I said, I much prefer working with tape. So you can see I'm pretty terrible with a knife. Right, so our cover is nicely taped up. Oh, and I found a price tag on it. Luckily that came off pretty easily. Right, so we're taped up. So now it's a matter of pulling the backing off the tape and sticking it all together. I don't recommend you do this in one hit. I think you need to do one side at a time. I have also found you can't lie the book flat. You have to do the one side and then close it up and then do the other side. If you do it flat, when you try and close it up, your paper will rip because it's too tight over this edge of the spine. So you need to wrap it around, which can be a little bit tricky. And then take the other tape off the other side, or the backing off the tape of the other side, and then do that side on top. Making sure that you get it nice and flat. So you can see it's not exactly flat over the spine, which is what we need, or else it won't bend over the spine properly. Then it's a matter of doing your corners. This is another time that the book binding tool comes in handy. But again, you could absolutely do it without it. Just leave a little tiny bit of an edge. Don't go all the way right into the corner. You do need a little bit of an overlap, or else your cover won't meet properly. And with the tape already on your paper, it's just a matter of folding it over and sticking it down. So again, do one side at a time, turn it over and do the other side, making sure that you pull it in nice and tight. And then your top and your bottom, making sure you turn those little corners in to make sure it's nice and flat. So again, start from the middle and work your way out, making sure that you've got space in order to twist that spine, or fold the spine back in nice and flat. Yep. And then work on the other side. Again, starting from the middle and working out. And then I realised that I hadn't folded the edges in. So luckily the tape's a little bit forgiving on this surface, and I was able to pull it up and then try again. Again, starting from the middle and working your way out, using your bone folder to get it nice and flat. And there's your outside edge, done. So it's back to your original piece. If that's what you want to use, you can use a contrasting piece of paper or cardstock, whatever you feel like, but this is for the inside cover, to cover up that original piece in there, the blue in this case. So I just, with all of them so far, I've just left them the same design as the outside, just for consistency, but you can, of course, do whatever you want in there. So just leave, about 1/4 of an inch, top and bottom. Again, I like to do this with tape, not with glue. It makes it very flat and very secure. No lumpy bumpy bits. And it goes all the way to the edge. So it sits down really well. So you need two, one for the front and one for the back. And then I realised that the barcode was in the corner. So you just need to have them both the same size. See, my bad knife skills, I messed up the corner. Yeah, front and back, same size. So luckily I was able to just miss the barcode on the edge of the piece. So again, tape them up or glue, whatever you prefer. all the way to the edges so that it will stick right over to the edge. Again, with the tape, I find securing it in the middle first and then working out to the edges helps to try and get it nice and flat on your paper. Because again, tape is not forgiving on paper. It will not come off. Right, so the same with the other side. Putting the tape on and just cutting off the excess, making it nice and smooth, and tape all the way to the edge. And then just a matter of which one you want, front or back, work out your pattern. I think I decided I wanted the deer, and the majority of the deer one at the front, where it's more likely going to be seen. So just even it up as much as you can. I really don't measure it. I just stick it down. If it's not exactly even, doesn't really faze me in the slightest. I said I'm not selling these. I don't give them away. They're purely just for my journal, and then they sit on a shelf. So yeah. So just about 1/4 of an inch smaller than your outside piece, but not very much. And then I just eyeball it and stick it down. So you can see it's not exactly even, and that doesn't worry me at all. Okay, so now we just got to make the inner spine. I don't like having the stitching visible on the outside of the book, so I make an internal spine to attach the signatures to, and then that gets hidden away, and you don't have to see all the stitching then, which is what I much prefer. So this spine has to be slightly shorter than the outside spine, and about 1/2 centimetre, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 centimetre smaller than the outside spine in width, or else your front and back cover will not close properly if it's the same size. So I don't have much paper left without cutting any more new off my sheet of poster, but that's good enough. I can just see the barcode down the bottom. That's all right, we're going to deal with that. So again, I just cover it. It doesn't matter if the pattern's not going the same way, because you're very rarely going to see it. It's really just the colour, a bit of the same colour that's going to be showing through. It really doesn't matter what the pattern is, because it's very rarely going to be seen. So there's my taped up piece. So we're just going to put the card for the internal spine on there. You can see it doesn't go over the edges. Usually I would have it go over the edges at the top and bottom and fold it over, but this piece didn't have enough in it to do that, but that's okay, because I'm going to put some paste around the outside, the vintage paste that will cover in those ends and also cover up that bit of barcode. And it just looks like it's as it says, it's a vintage paste. It just makes it look a bit vintagey. I have done that on several of my other books, on just to give it that more vintagey type feel. Again, it doesn't really matter with this one because the internal spine you're very rarely going to see. It's just a matter of disguising the top and the bottom of the card because I didn't have enough paper to go over it, and that barcode down the bottom. Just beware, vintage paste gets everywhere. Right, so yep, so that's going to sit in there. I said I've done vintage paste for a couple of my other books. However, I decided for this book not to vintage around the edge, only because it's quite, so that one's got that's got the vintage paste around the outside to give it a bit of a vintagey type look. I decided not to do it on this one because the pattern is quite brown anyway. I thought just doing that internal spine, it made it quite dark, and I didn't want the whole book looking that dark, so I decided not to do it around the whole book. I'm just going to leave it on that internal spine because, as you can see, it just disguises that barcode. So now it's a matter of getting on with doing the signatures. So I decided I like them very well secured, so I've done 6 sew points, or 6 holes for sewing, and there you can see I'm showing it's 4 centimeters between each sew hole for this particular size. So you need to leave a little gap at the top and the bottom because you don't want your holes right on the edge. And then I've got a template that I've created to put my holes for my stitches. So as you can see, it's got a little nick on the end, and I just line that up with the pencil mark that I've made on the side of that spine, and then punch my holes through. So I've got 6 signatures for these books, so I have to do 6 holes evenly spaced apart with a small gap on at the start and the end, because you again don't want your holes right on the edge. I'll work out the sizes and I'll put them in the description. So just make your holes for your stitching to go through. I said there's 6 stitching points because I like them really secure. You don't have to do 6. You could do 2 if you wanted to. Do more or less. It's totally up to you. I just found 6 worked really nice and neatly. And it's held together quite well in the books that I've already created and then filled. So I'm sticking with 6 for me for now. So again, line up the notch with the marks that I made in the pencil from the other template and put your holes through. You just have to have your holes big enough that your needle will go through, because stitching them on is quite fiddly and you need your needle to go through snugly but not too hard. Right, and there's our holes made, ready for our stitches, for our signatures. So as I said, I use 2 Heidi Swapp notebooks. I use 1.5 actually, but I of course need to have 2. So I just take the stitching out of the books, and as you can see there's only 1 signature per notebook, and therefore you could if you haven't seen my other books that I've created using these or the other folders, they get very, very thick. And a lot of the gator mouth happening when there's only one signature and the spine's so little. So I split the book up, and each Heidi Swapp storyline chapters notebook I split into 4 signatures with 3 sheets per signature. So then I end up, I said 1.5 books, so I end up with 6 signatures. So therefore the other 2 that are left over from this book will be added to the next book. So 3 books over 2 months, which is how I used to do it in the folders, 3 books over 2 months. So you just got to carefully take your stitching out so that you don't rip the pages. I don't keep the covers. I started for a while, but I couldn't find anything to do with them, so I'm just throwing them out now. So while they're still in the one signature, it's easier to mark your holes, because then you get all sheets together and get your holes all in the right spot. So again, go back to the template that you made for the internal spine, where your sew holes are going to be, and you mark the same holes on your sheets. Right, once you've done that, then you can split them up and create your signatures. So I said I do 3 sleeves or 3 sheets per signature. So I get 4 out of the one notebook, and then I just reinforce that fold as being in one signature. They're not folded entirely flat. So again, 3 for the next book, and I only need 2, so that's half the book, and I'll use the other half for the next one. Again, just reinforce that fold, get those edges nice and flat, and then you've got your 6 signatures to go in our book. Right, and they will fit nicely in there. So then we get our thread. You need decent thread too. I've found thinner thread just rips the pages too easily. I'll put the size that I used in the description. I also found out after I bought this thread that it's not waxed, which is usually the preferred thread for bookbinding, but I haven't necessarily found this any different to use, and it hasn't had any issues, the fact that it's not waxed. So you do obviously do 1 signature at a time, starting from the back of your internal spine, going through your pages, through your spine, sort of start in the middle, work your way either up or down, and then back to the middle. So it's a bit tricky just to get started because it's all wobbly and all over the place. But once you've gone down to either the top or the bottom and you work your way back, you've got to make sure you pull it really nice and tight, but not too tight that you rip your page. And you've got to try and hold it, and then keep pulling it tight as you go through. Yep, pull it tight. This bit is quite fiddly and tricky, and my hands are going all over the place trying to make what I'm doing visible to the camera. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this hard. As I said, I'm just trying to make it visible for the camera as much as possible. So yeah, pull it all nice and tight, and then tie it off in the middle. You need to leave long tags, so don't worry about if you have got lots of thread left over, because you need long tags to. So that's one done, and then we work our way through and do the rest of them. I always do way too much thread, but I'd prefer to have too much than not enough. So again, starting same spot with your next one. Giving yourself a nice long tag at the end. Making sure you're getting the next set of holes and not messing up your rows. Again, this is just how I do it. There is plenty of different ways that you can stitch signatures into a book. I've just found this works for me, for my books. And as I said, I like having 6 holes to make it really nice and secure. As you can see, you constantly have to keep it tight. You don't want a super sharp needle either, because otherwise you'll stab yourself and you'll rip holes in your page too. You want a pretty solid needle that doesn't have a very pointy tip on it. Again, so when you're back, just tie your threads together, making sure that it's nice and tight. I'm shocking at trying knots. Can never get them flat or even or tight. Again, leaving your tags long. Alright, so there's 2. You can see a nice little gap in there to space our signatures out. Alright, so we skipped ahead. We're up to the last one now. Don't think we needed to see me stitch every single one of those signatures in. So we're up to the last one. And I didn't leave a long enough tag and it fell out. And then managed to get a knot in my thread. So I said this is not waxed thread, but so far it hasn't really been an issue with me. You just need thick, decent sized thread, because otherwise, because these original notebooks were sewn in place, they've already got lots of holes. So if you have little thin thread, it will cut through and it will rip your holes. So you need thicker thread, and I said I'll put the size thread that I've used in the description. Again, pulling it nice and tight, which you have to maintain throughout. Terrible at knots, particularly when you're trying to hold one side down with your finger. Okay, so there our signatures are in, all evenly spaced, all evenly positioned. And as you can see, you can hardly see that's internal spine, so it really doesn't matter what the pattern is, what it looks like. It's purely just like a colour match to the rest of the book. So just make sure your end threads are not too long that they're going to stick out the end of your book. And then we're back to glue. Again, I can't get away with double-sided tape for this part of the process, so I have to get my glue back out. And then we're just going to glue the whole lot down flat so that all those threads are glued into the back of the spine, so you don't see them, but they're long enough that if the knots do come undone, then it's all stuck in place anyway. And look at that, one of my knots is already undone. Shows you how bad I am at knots. And it was definitely not easier with having glue all over the thread. So yeah, just glue them up and down so that they're glued into the back. They don't stick out anywhere. And again, this is where you need glue over everything, not just in little glue bottle swiggle lines. You need it over the whole lot. And then it's just a matter of placing it on your base in the right spot, just checking that both sides will close, and then putting some weight on the top of it so that while it dries it will stick everything down and in place. So generally I leave it now for a few hours. This one I actually left overnight, so come back the next day, take all my books off, just purely just for weights, and let's see what we've got. Let's see how it's all finished up. So there we go, it's all stuck in. You can't see any threads. The internal spine is secured to the outside spine, and all of our signatures are in place, evenly spaced, even top and bottom, ready for it to be used for another monthly journal. So that's how I make my books. It's by no means the only way to make books, and I'm by no means an expert, but I'm pretty happy with my books and how they look. So I hope you got some interesting points or learnt something new out of that, and thanks for watching.